Okay, everyone, I think it's 5 minutes past the hour. Let's go ahead and get started. So once again, this is Steve Barry with ThreatLocker. Wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining us this afternoon. We're very excited about this, showing what ThreatLocker is capable of doing when it comes to cybersecurity and protecting the environments. You'll see it's very, very flexible, very powerful. If you don't trust it, it will not run. So we've got Danny Jenkins and Andrew Phillips from ThreatLocker here. Danny will be providing the overview. It's going to be a little interactive, but he's going to give you a full scale display of what our product can do for you. So with that, I'd like to introduce Danny Jenkins and once again say thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Steve. And good afternoon, everybody. And just before I begin, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background of why ThreatLocker exists and why we do what we do. We've been around for a little less than 5 years now, and we're growing at huge amounts every single month. And part of the reason for that is when we started ThreatLocker, we didn't come to the market to say we want to be a better antivirus or we want to be a better threat detection system or EDR or whatever the latest trend is. We came to the market saying security is really important, but you can't find every bad guy out there. You can't block every threat because it's impossible to keep looking for bad things, hoping that you can find it. So what ThreatLocker did is we came in with a different approach. We came in with the approach, instead of trying to look for bad things, we want to identify really what is needed to run in your environment, what's needed in your environment, and deny everything else. That way we're not reliant on have we found the latest trend of threat or have we found the latest malware or ransomware or Chrome extension that could be a problem or way something could be a problem. We're actually just going to say it's simple. Don't let it run. If you don't need it, don't let it run. This approach, as a security guy, I use this approach in lots of enterprises many times. And typically when I went to a new client and said to them, you need to stop relying on AV, and that's fine to use your AV, but you need to stop relying on it, and you need to use what's often referred to as an application whitelisting approach and deny everything. And quite often I got laughed out of the room. And back in those days, I was arrogant and naive, just as I am now, really. But I used to say, well, just take your medicine. You got to take your medicine or you're going to get breached. It's as simple as that. Everyone said to me, no, we don't have the resources. So when we created ThreatLocker, we said, okay, we need to take this approach, this zero trust approach, this whitelist approach, and we need to make it really, really quickly. And we started off with a whitelisting solution. And at first we said, okay, what are the biggest challenges with whitelisting? And the three were, what happens when you deploy this and you've got 20 to 60,000 files on 1,000 computers or 100 computers or 5,000 computers, and you don't know what they are? How do you even get started? So we had to figure out, how do we make the deployment easy? Then we had to figure out, how do we keep the management overhead down? So we looked at where are people struggling with the management. And the two areas, the biggest area was application updates, Windows updates, Office updates, Chrome updates. When you use a default deny approach and Microsoft releases a new version of Windows, and every month Microsoft releases about 25,000 unique files across the various versions of Windows that you have unique hashes, how are you going to permit those files? You can't be expected to add them every single time. So we wanted to deal with that issue. And then the same with Office and Chrome and other applications when they're self-updating. How do we deal with this issue? And then finally, what can you do about the approval process? If you're denying by default, it has to be really easy to approve it. So when ThreatLocker came around, we came out to solve those issues. And at this point, we are the leader in the whitelisting market. We do make zero trust and controlling what can run really, really easy and really, really viable, not just for big, huge enterprise, but also normal sized businesses that have limited IT resources and managed service providers where we've been extremely successful. Beyond that, we wanted to go further. We didn't want to stop at just controlling what could run. We wanted to say, well, how can we address other areas? How can we address people using your own tools against you? Every time you run a program on your computer, whether you're an administrator or you are a normal user, that program has access to everything that you have access to. So if you download Angry Birds from the internet and you play that game, Angry Birds could potentially encrypt your files, steal your files, or do anything else. Now, we don't expect Angry Birds to do that. Neither do we expect Office to do that, or Chrome to do that, or any other application we use. But quite often, one is you see developers writing bad applications, and others you just have malicious applications, and they can be used against you. So we took on this approach of what we call ring fencing. The idea of ring fencing is we say, first of all, we don't want anything to run, and that's the whitelisting part. Block everything that's not permitted. Secondly, we'll add ring fencing into the scenario. So when an application can run, we can define exactly what it can do. That way, one is if the application turns out to be bad when we thought it was good, we're actually putting boundaries and controls around it. And secondly, we can also stop vulnerabilities and exploits from limiting those exploits and vulnerabilities so they can't destroy our environment. And a perfect example of this is last November, Microsoft released an update for Internet Explorer. That update stopped Internet Explorer from being able to run PowerShell commands from a website. So essentially what an attacker could do is they could run a PowerShell command without any interaction from the user directly from a website. And that PowerShell command could do any kinds of damage on your computer. So what ring fencing allows us to do is it allows us to control what applications can do beyond just running. So we can say Office can run, PowerShell can run, Internet Explorer can run, but that doesn't mean Office and Internet Explorer can call PowerShell, or PowerShell can access our network shares, because while it needs to run, it doesn't necessarily need access to all of our data. By doing that, we stop attackers from weaponizing these applications and using them against us. I'm going to spend a little bit of time as well highlighting some of the new features. For those of you who use ThreatLocker, you are aware that it's very, very powerful. And while it's relatively simple to use and very easy to deploy, there are so many features in there. I'm not going to be able to get through them all in an hour's time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight some of the newer features. Some of them are very small, so for the people who are existing ThreatLocker customers, so that you can see what's changed. Just to begin, I was going to make sure everybody can see my screen. I'm just going to share it now. Steve, can you see my screen okay?
Andrew? Yes, Danny, I can see it.
Okay, cool. Okay, I do encourage people to ask questions. If you do have questions, please either raise your hand. We do want to hear from you too. If you don't want to talk, you can put it in the chat window and Steve or Andrew can pick them up and ask them to me. So if you do have questions as we go along, feel free to ask. Like I said, the first part of ThreatLocker is we want to lock this environment down. We don't want anything untrusted to be able to run. But to do that, we need to figure out what's running in the first place. So to get started with ThreatLocker, we wanted to make that really easy. When you sign up for ThreatLocker and you first log in, if you're a managed service provider, you're going to be able to see all of your clients in one place. If you're a single organization and you're logging in as an enterprise IT manager, you'll just log in and you'll be able to see your own account. To get started, you can either go to the computers page, you can click install new computer and download the installer. It's a single click and it will install in 30 seconds. If you're using Automate, Kaseya, SolarWinds N-Central, Ninja RMM, or any of the common RMMs, we have pre-canned scripts that will not only push the agent out for you, but if you are an MSP, it will create your clients on the system automatically. So you don't have to worry about creating the client and then pushing out the agent. You can just literally use the pre-canned script. It will call our API directly from your RMM and it will create the client for you. Once the computers are installed, the first stage is to let this learn. It's not to lock it down immediately. They're going to be installed in monitor-only mode and you'll be able to see your computers on the page here within 30 seconds of installing. It's going to immediately start logging everything that's happening on your machines. Every application that's running, every DLL, every script file that's running, you're going to see that start logging within a few moments of the audit. So you can go in here at any point in time and say, I want to know who's running PuTTY. And you can simply search the audit and you can see everyone who's opened PuTTY. It's also going to baseline everything on your machine. The average computer has somewhere between 20 and 60,000 DLL files, script files, executable files. And if you're trying to catalog that manually, it's going to be very, very difficult. So we're going to baseline it. We're going to upload that baseline and you'll see that in the audit. It'll be tagged as baseline rather than execute. And we're going to start learning from that. Most of the learning happens within the first day. So within the first 24 hours, we're going to create 95% of the policies that need to be created. So you'll be able to go into the policies page here and you'll be able to see a list of apps that we found in your environment and we'll create policies for you. Now, before I dig into these apps, for those of you who are network geeks and you're used to firewalls, the concept of this page is very much like a firewall, only not network traffic. We're essentially saying we create an app, a policy, they run from top to bottom. They can run at the enterprise level, they can run at the MSP level, they can run at the computer level or the computer group level. And inside these policies, we're essentially defining what they allow or deny. So in this case, we have a policy that allows Box, the application Box, and it permits it to run. They do run top to bottom, and they can be applied to specific users. They can be applied to Active Directory groups. They can be applied, they can be set to expire or only run from certain types of disks or various other things. The first policy that gets hit and matched, that's the policy that applies. And just like a firewall, at the very bottom, we have a default policy that defines what happens to everything else. Ultimately, in most cases, what happens to everything else after we're out in monitoring mode is going to be to deny the application from running. You can toy around with this and get into ring fencing where you say, instead of denying it from running, we're going to control what it can do if it's unknown. So for those who can't use a default deny approach but want to stop new apps from accessing their file server, they can change that around. I know I'm not going to get too deep into that right now. What's going to happen though is you push out the agent. Within about 24 hours, you're going to start seeing policies appear here, normally within a couple of hours. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try and match the applications that you're running in your environment with known applications. So if you're running Box or you're running Stamps or you're running Passportal or Office or Chrome or Paint.net, we're going to match them to known applications and we're going to build policies for you to allow those applications. We have about 270 known applications in our database and we add about 5 to 10. So that number is rapidly growing. If we don't know what the application is, we're going to create a policy for you. So if you do have custom line of business software, healthcare software, payroll software, we're going to find those files on your computer. We're going to catalog it and create the policy for you as well, automatically. We typically recommend you let this learn for about a week. Now, not every environment's the same. If you're in the middle of a ransomware attack, you probably don't even want to let it learn. You want to lock it down and start permitting by exception immediately. But in most cases where your environment isn't compromised or you don't believe it's compromised, let it learn for about a week. And the reason we ask you to let it learn for a week is because some things run from temporary folders, some things run from network drives that might not be caught in the initial baseline. So you can allow it to go and catalog those files. At the end of the week, what we recommend you do is we're going to set up an audit review with you, especially if you're an MSP for your first few customers, so you can get comfortable with this process. The idea of an audit review is that we can look at what's running in your environment and we can decide if we were to turn this on, what would get denied. So we don't want to have any shocks that you turn this on and suddenly your payroll system isn't working or something major isn't working. You can come into the audit here and you can say, if I turn this on today, show me everything that would be denied. And you'll be able to see here in a list everything that's going to be denied. So I have a few storage policies in place that are actually already active and they're being denied. We're still in monitoring mode. And we can see here that, oh, someone downloaded PuTTY. If they'd ran that download, it would have been denied because we don't automatically catalog things from the download folder. So you say, okay, if I want to allow that, I can allow it straight from here. If not, I'm happy that this list isn't going to break my business. I'm happy everything's comfortable. I can uncheck monitor only, and then we're locked down. The next part of this is now that we're locked down, what happens if there's a Windows update? If anyone's ever used a zero trust approach before, it's a big problem when vendors release update. It's fine if it's a static device that doesn't update, but if you've got a desktop machine that's pulling updates from the internet, that's pulling Adobe updates or pulling them from your Automate system or your RMM system, your RMM system or Windows updates or WSUS or whatever it may be, when those updates get released, it's a big problem when you take zero trust because it means those updates aren't going to be trusted and they're going to be blocked. And this is where ThreatLocker has been really, really successful. We decided we didn't just want to say, okay, here's a piece of software, take it and leave it. We've actually built a huge team behind that. So every time there's a Windows update released, an Office update, a Chrome update, a GoToMeeting update, a Zoom update, whatever it may be, we have a team of people behind that, downloading those updates, extracting those files, and making sure that we update those definitions. So when you see this is a built-in app, it means not only is the current version going to work, and it is actually what it says it's going to be, but the next version is going to work as well. Andrew, do you mind muting your mic? Sorry about that. We've got some background noise there.
Yep. Danny, this is Steve. I just wanted to reiterate so the first thing that anyone that wanted to give us ThreatLocker a shot is to deploy it. Is what behavior? How much labor will it take our MSP friends that do deploy it? Do they have to do anything during that 7 days?
No. So, and that's the really nice thing about this. I'll give you two examples that in the last 6 months or so that literally did a demo with ThreatLocker. At the end of the demo, they downloaded, one of them was with Kaseya, and it was 2,000 seats. They downloaded the Kaseya integration script. They pushed it out to all of their clients. They did it at the end of a demo. It took like 15 minutes, and most of that was talking garbage to me and not actually deploying. The second one was an Automate client. It was 1,400 endpoints. They pushed it out. They literally just push it out. It's going to take 5-10 minutes. Wait a week, and they can really just go home, go to bed, drink some beer, do whatever they want to do, and just wait for a week. So the first week, they're not going to do anything. At the end of that week, and we're going to set that audit review up with you. So we're going to go through the audit review just to make sure that nothing is that would be blocked, that if you turned it on. The next stage is really setting up a call. And that could be I've seen them be 5 minutes call, and I've seen them be an hour and a half call, but it's a relatively short call. Go over the audit review. And what we're looking for in this environment is two things. One is things that are running from places that we haven't profiled, like the downloads folder. We're also looking for any strange applications. If you have a strange custom line of business payroll app, it's always payroll apps that's downloading new unsigned DLLs from the internet every day. We're looking for those kind of things to make sure, do we need to create any custom policies around that? And if we do, we can create those custom policies there and then allow them. And I think we had a question chop. Okay, so somebody's already asked, what is the impact of the CPU on this? The CPU should be using 0% most of the time. There's very rarely you're going to see the CPU go up. When you first install, it's going to scan the baseline. That's capped out at 1 core. It's going to scan the disk. If you're using a solid state drive, it's going to take anywhere from 30 seconds if it's PCIe through to 5 minutes on the worst case slow solid state drives. If you're using a magnetic drive, that scan process could take 20, 30 minutes. I've never heard anyone complain about the scan slowing down their computer or interfering with them. After the installation is complete, if you hit deploy policies, the CPU might spike for a second, but typically you're looking at 0% on that.
Great, thank you.
So the next part of this is just to recap. We've pushed out the agent. We've waited a week. We've done an audit review, created any exceptions you need, and then we've locked this down. We've unchecked monitor only. We locked this down. The next stage of this is, well, what happens when someone tries to run new software? What if somebody downloads a new printer and scanner package, or a putty from the internet, a coupon clipper, which shouldn't be allowed? What do you want to do? How does that look for them? So as a user, if I download something and I try and run it and it's not allowed, I'm going to receive a message saying the application's been blocked. For all those managed service providers out there, you guys can actually brand this with your own logo and your own company name. From this pop-up, I have a few options. One is if I'm the IT administrator and I have the ThreatLocker credentials, I can just say my administrator is present and I can enter my credentials. The next stage is, as a user, I can just hit request permission. We do have various integrations of various ways that you can get these tickets into your help desk system. So if you're using if you're using ConnectWise Manager or using Kaseya or you're using Synchro, you can import these tickets into your system either through integration or through inbox rules. It will match them to the correct client, and you can actually approve that straight from the portal. So in this case, I'm just going to click on here. We can also get a text message when someone hits request permission, or an email. So if I'm out and about and I'm the IT guy and I'm a small managed service provider and someone hits request, I can get a text and I can click on that link from that text and I can approve it right from here. So here I can say, okay, this user has requested access to Putty. ThreatLocker actually knows what this is. It matches an existing application. That doesn't mean we endorse the application. We match TeamViewer to an existing application. We match LogMeIn and various remote access tools, Dropbox and things like that. But it doesn't mean the application is what it says it is. We've verified that this hash matches the hash when we've gone to Putty's website and we've downloaded it. So it gives you some confidence you are permitting what you expect to be. The other nice thing about it matching an existing application is we're saying, okay, it matches an application. Do I want to permit that? Do I want to permit that application with all of its dependencies at the same time? So I can say, yes, use the matched application. I can choose to permit that for the entire organization. the computer group. If you're an MSP, you can use your global groups here, which will apply to all of your customers, or just a single computer. So in this case, I'm going to say I want to permit this for the entire group, the workstations group. I can hit permit. In the background, what that's done is that's gone off and created a policy for me to allow PuTTY. We can edit that. We can make it temporary. We can assign it to certain users. We can change our mind and click deny. And that's important as well. When you do your initial review, you can go through here and say, oh, I don't want this application. I'm going to deny it. I don't think we should be running TeamViewer. Let's deny it. So we can always deny it if we want to as well. Within 30 seconds, the user is going to be able to run that program. So you can see here, I've just double clicked on it. It's allowed to run. So you can see it's a very, very simple process to approve new software. Now, we don't know what every single application in the world is, and that's impossible. So what we've done as well is we've taken the tools that we use to build things and we've enhanced them and productized them a little bit. So you can actually create your own definitions, your own application definitions very easily on the fly. Of course, when you first deploy, it's going to do it for you, but you can go off and you can say, I want to install this custom print driver that ThreatLocker doesn't know what it is, and it's got 60 different files in it. That approval process may be really, really simple, but if you're doing that 60 different times, that can be frustrating. So what we did is we came up with this concept of learning mode. The idea with learning mode is you can temporarily turn on learning mode, profile what's happening on a system, and allow that application to run. So in this case, I'm going to use Notepad++ as an example. It is a built-in application, so you don't need to use learning mode. But I'm going to say, I don't care. I'm going to create custom app, and I'm going to turn on learning mode to track installed files. Now I can do this from the tray right here. If I have my ThreatLocker credentials, I can do it from the computers page as well. So from in the computers page, I can hit start. If somebody calls me up and says, I need to install a new custom app, I can hit start, or I need to do an update of my ERP system, and it will track what's changing. I can do it from the approval center or the audit as well. So if something's denied here, I can go straight into the audit and say, show me what was denied. And I can literally just do the exact same thing where I can permit it and I can use either update an existing app or use learning mode there. Here, I'm going to do it from the tray because I'm on the computer. And what this is going to do is it's going to package and create all of the rules required to run this application. And I put this in moderate, so it's going to rely on certificates as well as hashes as well. I can hit permit. Instantly, I can run through the installation. At the end of the installation, I just hit end learning mode. It goes off. It's created that policy for me. So it's created that custom app policy, and also it's created an application definition. So, and this is basically a list of files required to run this application. So I can see those 22 or 24 rules created here. And while some of these are really obvious, this file was required by Notepad++, some of them are less obvious. We may have like this Lang DLL. You may never consider that that was required to run this in the temp folder. And that's what's nice about this. We're tracking everything. We're packaging it. Now that definition can be used. At the moment, it's being permitted for every group computer in the group, but it can also be changed to the organization, or even as a managed service provider, if you want to say this is an app we use across our entire stack, you can have that built into your app. You can just change that to a global policy. Now, the next stage of this is I want to jump into the ring fencing, because you can see the whitelisting is really, really easy. I did promise I'd point out some of the new features we have here for those who use it, so I probably should take that time to do that. One of the big changes we've made from the whitelisting side recently is we've added the ability to see directly where the policy is before it show you the policy name, and people are getting quite frustrated saying, oh, well, I don't know where this policy is that's denying this, because somebody denied this app and I've got 5 different levels. So we've added that and added the ability to click directly onto the policy from there. We've also added the ability to permit specific vendors. So if I wanted to trust everything from Google, which we wouldn't recommend you do, but if you do have specific payroll or vendors like that and you want to permit that vendor, you can directly do that from here. So I can click on that and just say I want to permit this vendor for the entire organization. We've also added a feature if you want to say, okay, well, I want to know what the history of this file, where did it come from if it's suddenly being denied? You can view the file history. You can see when was it installed, what process it was installed by, was it in the baseline? and things like that. So you can see every time it's ran and the full history of that file in there. These are little things to make your life a little bit easier if you're trying to figure out, should I permit this? Where did it come from? Was this something else? Somebody's asked the question, do you need to recreate a custom app install for every upgrade in Notepad++? And that's a really good question. So Notepad++ is a built-in app, so you'd never use the custom app anyway. But one of the things that we do when we're building the custom rules is we have a few different options. We have a relaxed method, which we don't ever recommend you use except extreme circumstances. We have a moderate, and the way that works is we actually created these policies to say, okay, I'm going to automatically create the rules for you. But you can see it's created the rules to allow these hashes. So if Notepad++ updated, these hashes would be different. But it also created a rule for the certificate. So as long as the vendor continues to sign it, it's going to be allowed going forward. From a Notepad++ perspective. You can use strict, where you can say, I'm only going to allow this version and not future versions. And that way, even if it's signed, the next version, it's not going to be allowed. Again, Notepad++, I use this as an example because it's a really easy app to install, but it is a built-in app. And the advantages of the built-in apps is we are constantly adding those hashes in for you. You don't have to worry about it. So you would never have to deal with the upgrades. And you'll find there's very few applications that MSPs use that are not built-in applications. The other thing that we've changed on the whitelisting point of view, and this is on 5.23, so if anyone's on 5.21, it hasn't applied. We've always blocked Chrome extensions, but one of the big frustrations with Chrome extensions is the file names on them are just these random file names. They're never signed, and unless it matched a built-in app, it was very hard for the administrators to see what is this Chrome extension that somebody's requesting access to. So if one of the changes we've made in the new build, I'm going to find just the Chrome store here and try and add a garbage extension, something that we don't have as a built-in. I doubt we have this as a built-in app.
Danny, I think you're muted. Yeah, you are muted.
Oh, sorry. So I apologize. Yeah, so I don't know how much I said there that was muted. So what we did is we added in the ability to track the extension names. It was very frustrating because Chrome extensions, they're never signed. You don't know who makes them. It's also worth noting, they're also incredibly dangerous. Last month, Google pulled over 500 extensions from their extension store that contain malicious software. And there's a few things worth noting. If you think about it, if you're using a LastPass extension or a Password Boss extension, you know that that Password Boss extension is adding the passwords when you click add. And that's fine because you've made a decision, I want to use LastPass, I trust LastPass. But if you think, if LastPass can read those passwords, so can this colorful Rubik's Cube, which we just tried to download. So you really want to make sure that Chrome extensions aren't being freely added. And it shows that Google app removed 500 that had already done damage and already injected malware into people's browser sessions. So you want to make sure Chrome extensions aren't being allowed. What we've done in version 5.23 to improve that is we continue to block them. But now instead of getting this random GUID of a path that nobody makes any sense on, when you expand on it, you can see what the application they're actually trying to install is. It's also going to tie it directly to the extension ID and not just the hash. So if the extension does update and you do it by the ID, that extension update is going to be allowed. Now, I'm not going to allow Rubik's Cube here, but I could just permit it here by clicking a single clip. And now I know what the application name is. Whereas in 5.21, people were saying, I don't know what this extension is. Should I allow it? Shouldn't I? And now you can see that and you can make the decision based on the real value. And hopefully you shouldn't be allowing too many extensions, just the ones you need in your business environment.
All right. Danny, I do have another question that was submitted. It says, in the app list where custom app 444 is shown, what is the up arrow icon that has two legs?
So it's to merge applications together. So if let's just say you created these two custom apps and you said, oh, these are actually the same app. I can click on it and I can merge it into another application. It's just about keeping general housekeeping and things like that to keep your app list a lot shorter. So you're not with 5 apps with the same name or similar names.
Great. Thank you.
The next part of this, and now we're on the Chrome extensions, it's a good time to use this. I mean, we talked about Chrome extensions being able to read passwords from browser sessions and inject malware, and it's becoming a very, very big issue. But one of the things that people are often very, very fog-headed about is, well, Chrome extensions are essentially HTML files and they can't get access to our system, so what's the big issue? Which is right. They're HTML and JavaScript files and they're running in the client browser. So they're not necessarily malicious in themselves, that they may not be able to directly encrypt a file. However, they can call other applications on your computer. And this is where the ring fencing is really, really important. So if we take 2 examples of this, like I said, at the beginning last year, this wasn't a Chrome extension. Internet Explorer had a vulnerability where a website could call PowerShell and they could pipe in PowerShell commands. Chrome extensions can call other Windows applications and potentially weaponize those applications against you, as can Office or Adobe Reader and many other front-end applications they did. So what we wanted to do about this, we wanted to say, okay, we're allowing these apps to run, we're allowing PowerShell to run, we're allowing RegServe to run. And RegServe itself is a terrifying tool in the Windows operating system, because essentially you can run a remote payload directly from a GitHub repository in protected memory from RegServe. And the AV really struggles to do anything until that RegServe process does enough damage that it can shut it down. So what we want to do is, first of all, take these back-end Windows apps that are potentially dangerous, and we want to make sure that they cannot be called from your front-end app. So if I take Office as an example, and I'm going to turn off my ring fencing policy just to demonstrate this. I'm just going to deploy policies. What this policy does is, and I'm going to show you it not in use first, is it says, okay, we're going to allow Microsoft Office to run, but we're going to ring fence it, and we're going to put boundaries or fences around that into what the application can and cannot do. So in this case, we're saying we don't want Office to be able to call any of these other apps on my system. Now we could say, don't let it call any other app on my system, or we could just say, don't let it call these ones that we know are dangerous. And we do the same with Internet Explorer, the same with Google Chrome, the same with Adobe Reader. And you don't have to think about these policies. We have these as suggested policies. So you can go into here, you can add suggested policies, and you can just simply add what we recommend from that point of view. Now, if I don't have that policy on and I open Office, I could open this Office document. I can click on this seamlessly harmless link, and suddenly PowerShell launches. I potentially piped in a command. I'm encrypting files. I'm copying data. I'm doing whatever I need, downloading some payload from the internet. And it could be PowerShell. It could be RegServe. It could be scheduled tasks. All of these are scary tools. And essentially by using that, scheduled tasks is another one that's used quite often, because what it will do is it'll create a foothold on your system that can then be used to download a payload later on or run a payload later on. If it can't call those tools, it can't do that. If I turn that policy on, give that 30 seconds to deploy, we're now saying, okay, this can no longer do that. It can still run, PowerShell can still run. And bear in mind, it could never call malware in the first place because the malware wouldn't be on the whitelist, but still, it's not just about malware, it's about the tools on your operating system. So if I now go into here and run the same test again, if I've waited long enough, we see that's not allowed. PowerShell can still open manually, but I can't run it from there. And if I go into the audit here, and I just say, show me anything I can see at the top of the list. Oh no, that's a different one. If I say, show me anything being denied, I can see that PowerShell was ring fenced because of this policy. Again, this is the reason we actually added this, because people struggled to see where the policy was. So you can now just click on it and go straight into that policy and make changes to it if you need to there and then. Now, the next part of this is, the first part is making sure these front-end applications, these web browsers, the things that read documents, can't call these weaponizable tools. The next part of it is how do we stop those back-end tools from being used themselves, even if whether it's through an RMM or whether it's through someone clicking on a link that wasn't ring fenced, or whether it's through someone literally sitting at your keyboard and typing encrypt, or they're using I don't know if you've ever heard these rubber duckies where they're USB essentially keys. They're not hard drives. You plug them in and they send a keyboard command to Control R. They run PowerShell.exe. They invoke a web request. They download something from the internet and then they run that on your machine. How do you stop that from being used, those tools being weaponized and used against you? Got a couple of questions here. Oh no, it's just a reply. It's fine. So what we want to do with those back-end applications is we also want to say what they can do, and we'll take PowerShell as an example. And again, these are all suggested policies out of the box. Whether you're using whitelisting or not, these are really useful policies to deal with some of the biggest risks of ransomware and data theft. Here I'm saying PowerShell is allowed to run, but it's not allowed to access my files. What that means is it's not allowed to access my network shares, my USB drives, or any other folder that I've determined as a protected resource in the storage control, which in this case, I'm going to show you on the documents folder. So if I do go into PowerShell and I go into my documents folder, I try and access my files, it literally is denied. And the other thing I've done is I've said PowerShell can't go out to the internet. If it can't go out to the internet, it can't get a payload, it can't upload data. If I try to go to the internet, I receive an access is denied. Again, all of this is logged in the audit. You can see that someone tried to go out to Google on PowerShell. And if we want it to go out to Google, and we'll see this in our monitoring stage too, if we want it to go out to our RMM server to get policies or to get scripts, we can whitelist those servers inside the app. So we can say, I'm just going to add that in there. Or if we wanted it to be able to, PowerShell to be able to read certain files but not write to them, again, we could whitelist certain file types. We could whitelist paths. We've got a lot of flexibility here. Another example of this is RegServe. Now, it's a little bit harder to demonstrate, so that's why I use PowerShell. But RegServe, again, is a terrifying tool. If it can't, I've never in 18 months of deploying this policy seen a legitimate reason for RegServe to ever go out to the internet. If it can't go out to the internet, if it can't call TCP IP connections, it cannot be used it cannot be weaponized against you. So somebody's asked a question, as an MSP, we rely on PowerShell to perform a large number of tasks. Is there a good balance between ring fencing and allowing an SP admins to use it? Absolutely. One of the things that you probably don't do as an MSP in your PowerShell task is access or certainly write to network shares. You may have a network share where you put some software on and you want to be able to read it, but quite often you do not need PowerShell to be able to go out to those network shares or even read the or go out to the documents folder. And where you do, it's probably read only. So when we create your ring fencing policy, we'll start off with in monitor mode saying, just see what it's doing. At the end of the week, you'll be able to see what PowerShell needs to do. We're not going to stop it doing the admin tools it needs to do, but you can stop it from accessing network shares. You can stop it encrypting files. And even if you change it to only read network shares, that's going to harden it. Or just read that one network share, because the chances are PowerShell doesn't need to access your QuickBooks share or your document share, but it may need to access software shares.
Danny, I want to interrupt here. There's another question from someone that's joined us. It says, as an MSP, we rely on PowerShell to perform a large number of tasks.
Steve, I just answered that one.
Oh, you did? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. So yeah, that was the one I'm answering. So just checking you're awake, Steve.
Yeah.
So yes, it really, out of the box, by stopping it go out to the internet, you can very easily add your RMM server into there. If you're using if you're doing installs directly from someone like Huntress, you can add their servers into there as permitted servers. That's not a problem. And then from the file stuff, it very seldom should need to access file documents. And where it does, you can just allow it. You can create those exceptions. It takes 30 seconds for a policy to apply. You're not going to be waiting ages, and you can apply them globally. So once you know, you can add that globally, so it'll apply to all of your customers. So I was saying, so the idea of this ring fencing is really twofold. One is we want to stop these applications being launched where they don't need to be launched. And the other area is we want to stop once these applications can be launched, that they only can access what they need to access. It's a very good idea. And not everybody does this on day one. And you can always put these in use. And this is actually a new feature. If you want to test the policy to see if it's going to cause you pain. So if you go in here today and you say, okay, I don't think paint.net needs to access any of my files. You probably does need to access files. You can go in here, you can ring fence paint.net. You can say, do not let it access any of my files. And then what you can do is say, I'm going to put that policy in monitor only mode. And in a week's time, come back in and see what's hitting the deny. You can filter by what's being denied. It will show in green. And you'll say, oh, actually, I forgot paint.net needs to access JPEG files. So I can go in here and I can just say, okay, I'm going to allow it to access JPEG files. The more you can ring fence, of course, the more secure your environment is, the better your environment is. But you don't want to get over the top. Angry Birds doesn't need to access your network share. Just ring fence it. It can't access my files. As simple as that. If you want to test it first, just put the policy in monitor only mode. Let it run for a few days, a few weeks, whatever you'd like. Come back in and see what's being denied and make any exceptions you need to make. This is another great feature that allows you to go in and ultimately ring fence more and more applications. The ultimate goal is if you can ring fence everything perfect, we definitely want to ring fence the high risk areas, which are things like the front end apps, the Office, the things that bring in documents, and then the back end apps that are often weaponized. So the next part of this is where it really gets involved in the storage control. And we actually have two separate products. If you're buying this as a managed service provider or as a business, you can buy the ThreatLocker suite, which includes everything. But then we have the application control and the storage control, and they do overlap with the ring fencing. The concept of the application control is to control what is running and what it can do once it's running. The concept of the storage control is really to control access to files and which applications can access files. One of the really cool features about the storage control is that it can access everything. So it can audit everything that is accessed. So if you have a network share and someone goes onto that share and they create a folder, and I'm going to say like type, I'm going to create this document here. If I go in and edit this document on my share, and this could be a map drive, it could just be a UNC. If I copy that document to a USB drive, it should get blocked. Yeah. Delete that document, move that document, whatever you want. All of that is logged in the audit. The moment you install this is going to happen. So if your clients, if your users, if they call you up and say, I've got a problem, my files have gone missing, you can see everyone that's read that file, what the actions were, and what happened. So we can see here that demo PC4, on demo PC4, admin read this document using Explorer. Admin then read the document using Notepad. They then wrote to the document using Notepad, tried to copy it to a USB drive. The drive wasn't encrypted. I can see the serial number. It was denied because we have a deny policy, and this was the policy that denied it. And then they deleted the file. So when somebody calls you and is missing a file, then it's going to... You'll be able to show them exactly where it went. We have a question, does ThreatLocker have a command line interface that you can automate these actions without logging in? We don't have a command line interface, but we do have a API, and we do have customers who use the API straight from things like Automate to put a computer into learning mode if they're pushing out software. I do really caution if you do that you do it very, very carefully, because if you leave API keys in Automate, and somebody can get into your Automate and they want to push out malware, they could potentially permit it before pushing it out. But yes, there is a REST API, and you can use PowerShell to call that as well if you have a server and you want to do some of these actions automatically. Now, one thing that is worth noting is a lot of this looks scary, and a lot of it looks like a lot of hard work. It really isn't that scary. If this is done right, you shouldn't be spending 1,000 users, you shouldn't be spending 2 hours a month in the portal. It should be very, very low maintenance. Some of the smaller managed service providers we have, the 200 users, the biggest support ticket we get from them is they've forgotten their password because they haven't logged in that long. So I have two more questions before I move on to more of the storage. One is install scripts for RMM. You can some of them you can find in the KB article. If you don't find one there, ask them because we have them as well. Ask our cyber heroes here, just saying I need a script for Ninja or I need a script for Synchro. If you go into threatlocker.kb.help, you can find Automate and Kaseya ones out of the box. And somebody asked which 2FA do you use? One of which is we have Duo integrated, Duo push integrated, and we also have text message built in, and we are adding some more in as well. And the free version of Duo works as well. So if you don't use Duo and you're not paying for it, you can just download the free account and it'll work perfectly.
Danny, there's one other question too. I'm not sure you're aware of. It says, is the ring fencing granular enough to access a specific IP address or URL?
Yes, absolutely. And it's worth noting it's an IP address, but it will work by host name. So you can say, and that's a really good use case for ring fencing. So you can say with the ring fencing, I've got Internet Explorer here, and I'm only going to allow Internet Explorer to access this one site because I don't want people using it to browse the web because it's unsecure. Microsoft hasn't improved the security posture in years on it. So I don't want people to be able to use it to browse the web, but we do have this whole old HVAC system that needs it, or this old payroll system, or this old whatever system, banking system that needs it. So we're going to allow Internet Explorer only to do that. So if you go into Chrome here, Chrome, you can see here that I've set certain policies, and you can do denies or allows. So you can say, when you check this box, what that means is this cannot access the internet except the list below. You can then override permit. So I've overridden a wildcard on port 443 and a wildcard on port 80. And I've also put a deny policy in for threatlocker.com, and I've overridden that. I'm not sure why, but I'm sure I had it in some demo for some reason. So you can specify which host names, which IP addresses you want to allow. And the other cool thing about the ring fencing is when it is enabled, you can see everything the application is doing. So I have Chrome ring fenced, and I can see all of the registry keys it's changing. I can see all of the websites it's connecting to, every IP address, every host name. Now, it's not web filtering, but it is definitely a firewall, and you can definitely say this app cannot access this site, and you can see the action in there as well. Now, moving forward into the storage control, the next part of this is the policy. So the audit's great. Being able to see who's opening what, who's copying files to USB drives, are they encrypted? Great. And we can build all custom reports around that as well, and who's using unencrypted USB drives, who's deleting files, and that's great. But the policies are really what is important. And these policies can range from the most simple policies. So if we take something like blocking USB drives, I've got a policy here: block, deny, read and write access to USB drives, give them a pop-up when they're blocked for any computer in the workstations group, for any type of file, all devices, anything on the interface, whether it's encrypted or not, for all users and groups, and all programs. You can get really granular. All of these are parameters you can set. So if I went to use a USB drive, we can see here it's going to get blocked. They'll get a pop-up. Again, just like before, you can say, my administrator is present. You can specify, I want to allow this USB drive for 2 hours based on its serial number for this computer only. The user can hit request. You can get a ticket in your PSA. You can go in and click approve. You can say, okay, I want to approve read and write access to this serial number based on USB drive for everyone in the computer group. So everyone in the workstations group. Again, it goes off and creates a policy. So I'm now allowed that USB drive based on this device. Now, let's just say you don't want to allow this USB drive fully. Maybe it's a digital camera and you don't want the user to be able to copy files off your network onto it. You could say, I'm going to actually change my mind, and that's only going to be read. And you know what? It's a digital camera and they only need to read JPEG files. And I want it only if it's encrypted, which is not, so I'm not going to do, or only for certain users, or only for the picture import app. So we can just save that policy there. Give that 30 seconds to replicate. So if I go into policies here, and then if I go into here, I can see, okay, now I can go on my USB drive. But when I try and open my docx, it's already tried to read it. It denies it. If I try and open my text file, it denies that. I can't copy that out of there. But if I open a JPEG or copy a JPEG, that's fine. It can read that because that's all they're allowed to do. So you can really get granular. It's not just a on or off. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can choose right to the level of what can do it, what program can do it. Maybe this is actually a backup drive and you change your mind and you say, actually, I'm going to permit read and write for all file types, but the only process that can open it is, and I don't know the path of it, but I'll just say veeam.exe. So then nothing can read it but that. And I know that's not the right path for anyone who's paying attention. But you can get very, very granular. So certain applications can't access it or certain applications can access it. It's not just USB drives as well. It's any storage device, any network share. So I have a policy here for my network share, which full disclosure is a loopback share. I'm permitting read and write to this share, but I'm only allowing these programs. So if I forgot to ring fence something and I've allowed it and it turns out to be malicious, it can't access it unless it's in this list. I can auto populate this list. So it happens automatically. So you don't have to figure out what's accessing it during the learning period. So I can go into my network share here and we permitted Notepad++. We didn't ring fence it, so it has no restrictions on what it can do. Notepad's on the list. I can open this file in Notepad. But if I go into Notepad++, even though it's on the list, it's not allowed to read my file server. So it can't encrypt my files. It can't delete my files. And this is another great way of protecting yourself from users and ransomware and applications going rogue and taking your data. Another example, this one's my favorite. One of the things that really drives me insane, and I will not share my desktop after saying this, is when we go to trade shows and one of our sales guys opens their laptops and they have 500 documents on their desktop. So this is the best policy ever, I think, for that. We have a policy here that says deny write access to these file types to the desktop with no pop-up, no prompt. Someone tries to copy this to a desktop, it gets denied. They don't get a Windows prompt. It gets blocked. These policies can get very, very granular. You can apply them to folders on your C drive. You can apply them to USB drives. You can apply them to network shares. You can monitor a share on a file server so you can see who's accessing that share. And in 5.24, which is not released yet, it's going into dev build this week. So people who want to do really early testing, they can test it. That allows you to actually say on your file server, don't let people access my file server if they're not running ThreatLocker on their client. So you can actually say, don't allow it unless they're running it. Another cool policy, and I know I have one somewhere here. Maybe it's been deleted, which a lot of people are doing now. I'm going to create a new group because I think it creates them by default as off. That's very, very effective. Again, I mean, I know we've already given you so many different ways that we can stop ransomware, and I don't want to keep saying it over and over again, but the more layers you can have, the better. Is deny access to C dollar shares. If you don't write to C dollar shares, block it. Block access to writing to admin dollar shares. That makes it really hard for things to spread on your network. The less that can spread, the more effective your security is. I think we have another question there. When you permit certain users, what user list is that pulling from? Do you need to define a list or an AD? So you can type in lists of users using their Active Directory login. So if I went into here and said this policy, I can type in a username and I can either type, domain/Danny, or I can use, if I wanted to say the local administrator account, I could do that. But we can also, if we use Active Directory sync tool, we can pull the groups from Active Directory and then we can use their group, the Active Directory group. So you can say only the domain admins can do this, or only the sales department can do this. And that applies to the application control as well. The entire concept of this and everything we're trying to do is not to try and look for more threats, but ultimately is to harden your environment as much as you can without causing you pain in your business. We're not here to say, if you use TeamViewer, you shouldn't do it, because that's not our opinion. Our opinion is, if you need TeamViewer, if you have a business reason for it, allow it to run. If you don't need TeamViewer, don't allow it to run. That saves you in a lot of areas. It saves you, for example, from, and this is happening very, very frequently, more frequently than you'd expect, where attackers and hackers are sending your clients emails from either spoofing your email address or just from a similar email address saying, we have a problem with our Screen Connect server. We have a problem with our Kaseya server. Can you click on this link so we can get on your machine and do an update? I've seen 6 cases of this in the last month of new MSPs who have signed up for ThreatLocker that have had 6. That's just me, and I'm only one person doing demos. 3 of which ended up in ransomware attacks, 1 of which ended up in someone's passwords being looked at in their browser. If you don't need TeamViewer and somebody sends your client a link, or log me in and somebody sends your client a link saying, do you want to click on this log me in link? It won't be able to run. It's one less surface area of attack. The less you allow, the more effective it is. We don't want you to lock down your system so they're unusable, and you don't need to. This shouldn't be a big overhead management. Most people use 5 to 10 applications in their day-to-day business. If you don't need to run more, don't allow them to run more. That means the ransomware can't run. That means viruses can't run. And it means people can't exploit good tools or other remote access tools to get onto your system as well.
That's great, Danny. I want to bring up another question from Chip. It says, does the storage control work for OneDrive for Business and SharePoint?
So the storage control, it finishes at the endpoint. It doesn't go into the cloud. But yes, you can protect your OneDrive folder and you can monitor your OneDrive folder, but it's not going to get into SharePoint and look at their logs and control things inside SharePoint. But if they're using applications on their computer and you monitor either a Dropbox or a OneDrive or anything, you can monitor anything you'd like. So you can just go in here. And that's the same applies to the ring fencing, obviously. If I go into my workstations, so I've just put a list of assets I want to audit, and I've put my documents folder, my drivers folder, my Dropbox folder, and you can put OneDrive folder or G Drive or whatever you'd like in there. But it doesn't stop someone going into a browser and changing files in the URL inside the SharePoint window. Okay.
Great. Yeah, there's one other that just popped up. This one's from Rick, and I'll surmise. He said, could there be a way somehow signal a router to just disallow any PC not running ThreatLocker? This way, any PC that arrives on the local area network needs ThreatLocker.
To signal a router, it's going to be difficult. There's 2 parts to this. The new 524 is going to stop them connecting to your file shares if they're not running ThreatLocker. So they may be able to come onto your network, but they won't be able to connect and access your file shares on the network. That's in 524. It goes into our dev build this week, and we encourage, now dev builds do tend to be higher risk than the beta builds, but if anyone wants to try it out, please let me know, because we're always looking for customers who are willing to try stuff out like that. That is a really great feature. To give you an idea of our roadmap, we have 2 new features coming. One is the ability to allow applications to elevate in certain circumstances. If you need to, so you can say this app can run in an elevated control. The other new feature we have coming out this year is the ability to have a firewall built, a ThreatLocker firewall on your client. So just like you see with the storage control and the application control, and we're kind of a firewall now in that we work outbound, but we're not an inbound firewall. What you'll be able to do with the inbound firewall is 2 things. One is you'll be able to see what's trying to access your clients, create global policies, open ports across the board, close ports across the board, but you'll also be able to enforce connections to your file server where you can't have a firewall on, or you have to have ports like 139 or 445 open. You'll be able to say, don't allow connections, any TCP/IP connections from anyone that's not running ThreatLocker. It'd be cool if we could get into the routers or the switches, but I don't think that's possible. So,
good thought though.
So, okay. This tool is really, really powerful, and I hope I've portrayed some of the value in the last hour. If you don't think this is right for you, or you don't want to use ThreatLocker, I'd ask you to please at least consider doing some things to harden your environment. Consider a default deny approach. Consider a whitelisting approach. Lock down your shares where you can, because it doesn't matter how good your threat detection techniques are. Ultimately, there's always going to be ways around them. The harder your environment, the smaller the surface area, the less likely you are going to get attacked. And you should be aware of how easy it is to attack people through unknown malware, through browser plugins, through PowerShell commands that can be passed in. So lock down your environments as much as you can. ThreatLocker is a great tool for doing that. It really makes it easy, and it is managed service provider friendly. So it's multi-tenant. Clients can have their own logins if need be. You can give different levels of permission. You can see all your clients in one pane of glass. So you can go into the audit and you can search across all your clients, and you can go into the approval center, search across all your clients. We can create reports across your clients. There's integrations with things like Kaseya and ConnectWise, and the scripts all there. It really is a very easy tool to manage. And it's not just another tool looking for bad stuff. This is a tool that's really going to help you lock down your environment, not at the other end of the scale, not just another thing piling on top of. It doesn't help you to have 10 house alarms in your house. If someone breaks in, you're going to get a whole lot of noise. At some point, you want to put a bolt on the door as well. And really, that's what ThreatLocker's philosophy is. Stop just trying to put house alarms in or other things in your house to try and secure it. Put some bolts on the door and control what's coming in the first place. And that's really going to help you harden your environment. This is a cloud-only solution. Cloud client. So you do have a client on the computer. If you have clients who don't have access to the internet, we have proxy options where you can put a proxy. Sorry, I probably should read the question first. Somebody asked, is this a cloud or on-premise? It's primarily cloud-driven. The clients, and the nice thing about that is wherever your clients are, they're always going to be able to talk. If someone's sitting in Starbucks opening files on a USB drive, you're going to be able to see that, and they check in. The policies do work offline. They're not talking to the cloud in real time, so it's not going to slow down your machine. They just ping the cloud every 30 seconds and say, is there a new policy set? Yes or no. If there is one, it downloads it. And if you do have clients like banking clients or clients in the finance space where they don't have direct access to the internet, we have some options with a proxy or a relay type thing that can handle the policies there. So if anyone would like to sign up for a trial, there's 2 steps in the trial. The first one is sign up, download and deploy the agent. It's very, very easy. Just go onto ThreatLocker. If you go to, and we can send the link out to everyone who's registered, portal.threatlocker.com/sign up. You can sign up for an account here. You'll get an account, you'll get an email. The first step is once you log in, you go to the computers page, you download the installer. If you're using an RMM, you can use our scripts. If you're struggling to find a script, just click on the Get Help from a Cyber Hero. We don't just sell product. We back that up with 24-hour support, US-based support, where you can speak to a real person, you can have a Zoom session, and they will help you with the deployment. Our average response time on that is 48 seconds. So if you do have any questions, click there. The first stage, like I said, is downloading and deploying the agent. The next stage is setting up an audit review. We're going to go through with you. We're going to help you understand how you can make exceptions for those strange apps. When you do that, when you sign up for a trial, you will get a link with a Calendly link at the bottom. You can click on that and you can book an audit review. Book the audit review as soon as you set up your trial for a week out. That way you're going to be on the calendar, and one of the sales engineers is going to help you go through that. So if you'd like to go for a trial, like I said, it's portal.threatlocker.com/sign up. I will just stick it in the chat window just so everybody has it. And once you get your email after you've signed up, just click on the Calendly link and book your audit review a week after. We also do training nearly every Thursday. If anyone wants to get into more detailed training, once you sign up, you'll be sent links to register for the training. So feel free to attend those as well. Is there any other questions, or did somebody did ask if we're going to send a recording because it would be useful for their staff. We will send the recording out to everybody who registered, and it will be uploaded onto YouTube probably by the end of today or the beginning of tomorrow.
Great.
Someone asked about the white label option as well. So I'll just, so I've just posted the link in. I got a question about repeat the URL. I've just posted it into the chat window. The white label option, you can go in, and you probably should set this up at the beginning if you'd like it, because then it will automatically apply to your clients. Otherwise you have to set it for each client. But if you go into here, click branding, you can put a URL to 100 by 100 pixel URL, and you can put your company name in there, and that will change the tray branding for you. So some people ask about cost. The cost, because this is going to be publicly recorded, and we MSPs obviously appreciate their costs being kept quiet to their clients. We will send out pricing. So I'll get Steve or Andrew to reach out to you, the person that just asked, and about pricing, so you've got an idea of what it costs. And just if you'd like to, when you get that Calendly link as well, and you book your audit review, you can book time to speak to someone about pricing and stuff like that on the end. But it is in line with what you'd expect a typical endpoint security product to be, so it's not going to be extortionately expensive.
Right.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Danny. This is Steve. I don't see any additional questions that you haven't addressed already. If you want, we can wait for another moment, or we can go ahead and move forward. It's up to you. I did want to reiterate that, you know, as valued consultants in the cybersecurity ecosystem, it's important for all of us to do our very best to provide the best tools available to protect data. That data is our customers. It could be our own data. And we know that the traditional, maybe even next-gen antiviruses are not up to par. If they were, we wouldn't have a problem with ransomware. I think we can all agree. Well, ThreatLocker has put forward a product that's in place that, as Danny has showed you, and it can get even deeper, gives you the visibility, the granular control, and audit the capabilities to provide the real top strong layer of security. So we're looking for partners that want to push this out into their own network as well as all of their customers, because we are very confident by shrinking that threat surface that we can help ensure that those networks, so those endpoints, are protected. So thank you very much for your time. And do you have anything else to add?
No, I think that's everything. I appreciate everybody's time, and you know, I look forward to working with you, everyone, in the future. Okay.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for all joining.
Bye-bye. Have a good day and weekend.